hardest part wasn't moving into the nursing home. It was driving past my own house on the way there. My daughter was behind the wheel. My son followed us in his pickup. We stopped at the traffic light at the entrance to my neighborhood. One left turn. That's all it would have taken to get home. Instead, the light turned green. Melissa drove straight. Nobody said a word. That's when I believed I'd never live in my house again. And for a long time, I blamed my children for that. My name's Walter. I'm 74. I spent almost 40 years working as a machinist outside Dayton. The work wasn't exciting, but it paid the bills, kept food on the table, and sent 2 kids to college. That felt like a good life. My wife, Ellen, used to joke that I measured love in overtime hours. She wasn't wrong. If the plant needed somebody on a Saturday, I was there. Back then, I thought every extra shift meant a better future for my family. Looking back, I wonder how many dinners I missed. Ellen died 9 years ago. After that, the house got quieter than I ever imagined. Some mornings, I'd still pour 2 cups of coffee before catching myself. Old habits stick around. Melissa taught 4th grade about 40 minutes away. Brian owned a heating and air conditioning business. They called every week, visited when they could. I never questioned whether they loved me. The fall changed everything. It happened after an ice storm. I went outside with a bag of salt and woke up staring at a grey winter sky, unable to stand. The surgery went well. Recovery didn't. The doctors kept saying the same thing. You have to be careful. I hated hearing that. Careful sounded like somebody else, not me. When I came home, my kids took over. Melissa stayed during the week. Brian covered weekends. They installed grab bars, removed rugs, bought a shower chair. Then things started disappearing. My ladder, the chainsaw, the step stool. Where's my ladder? I asked. Brian barely looked up. I put it away. You locked the garage. For now. I didn't like the sound of that. One afternoon, I caught Melissa carrying boxes to her SUV. What are those? Just cleaning up a little. Cleaning up what? She glanced at Brian. Neither of them answered. That's when the thought first crossed my mind. They're getting the house ready. A week later, I asked Brian to drive me home after therapy. I just want to check the mail. I already did. I'd still like to see the house. He gripped the steering wheel. Not today. Why? It just isn't. Instead of turning toward my neighborhood, he pulled into a grocery store. We need milk. I stared out the window. Milk seemed more important than taking me home. That evening, I called my neighbor, Hank. No answer. I called again the next morning. Voicemail. I left a message asking him to check on the house. He never called back. A few days later, Melissa came over carrying a manila folder. She set it on the kitchen table. Dad, we need to talk. I looked at the folder, then at her. I already knew what was coming. I just didn't know how much of my life was about to change. I don't remember much of that conversation. Just words. Safer. Recovery. Professional care. 3 days later, Melissa packed 2 suitcases. She folded my clothes, zipped them shut, and said, "We'll come see you tomorrow." I nodded. Neither of us believed that was the hardest part. The hardest part was leaving. The nursing home felt smaller than I'd imagined. 1 room, 1 bed, 1 window overlooking a parking lot. The television played all day, though nobody really watched it. People just liked hearing another voice. Melissa came almost every evening, sometimes with soup, sometimes with clean laundry, sometimes just to sit for half an hour. Brian came every Saturday carrying his toolbox. Every visit, he'd find something to fix: a cabinet handle, a closet door, the batteries in the clock. I finally asked, "Don't they have maintenance here?" He smiled. "Probably." That was all. One afternoon, I was drinking terrible coffee outside when a nurse named Denise sat beside me. She pointed toward the parking lot. "That's your daughter." Melissa had just gotten into her SUV. She didn't start it. She sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, then lowered her head. Denise quietly said, "She cries almost every time she leaves." I kept watching until the SUV pulled away. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. If she'd wanted me out of her life, why did leaving hurt her so much? A few days later, I asked Brian, "Take me home." He looked down. "I can't. I just want to see the house. Please don't ask me." He'd never sounded so defeated. The following Monday, my neighbor Hank finally answered my call. "Hank, how's the place looking?" Long silence. Then he quietly said, "I don't think I should be the one telling you." Before I could ask what he meant, he changed the subject. That answer stayed with me. A couple of days later, I was walking back from therapy when I heard Melissa and Brian talking behind a half-open door. The realtor called. "I know. They can list it next week." My heart dropped. "I hate this," Melissa whispered. "So do I," Brian answered. "But we don't have another choice." I didn't wait to hear anything else. Back in my room, I opened the nightstand. Inside was my spare house key. I'd carried it for almost 30 years. Now, it probably didn't open anything that belonged to me. That evening, Melissa knocked on my door. "Dad?" I stayed quiet. Brian called the next morning. I let it ring. Saturday came. He showed up anyway. The nurse asked if I wanted a visitor. I said, "Tell him I'm sleeping." I wasn't. For the first time in my life, I wanted my children to feel what it was like to be shut out. Late Sunday afternoon, there was another knock. Brian stepped inside. He sat across from me without saying a word. Finally, he looked at the floor. "You heard us?" "Yeah," he nodded. "But you didn't hear enough." Brian pulled a thick envelope from his jacket and placed it on the table. "Open it." Inside were mortgage papers, loan statements, bank records. I recognized my signature immediately. The first refinance had happened 12 years earlier. Brian's business was about to fail. He never asked me for money. I offered it anyway. I told him I'd been saving for years. That wasn't true. A few years later, Melissa's marriage fell apart. She was trying to keep the kids in the same school district, working full-time, paying lawyers. I refinanced the house again. She thought the money came from an investment. I let her believe that. The last refinance came when Ellen got sick. By then, I was sure I'd find a way to pay everything back. I never did. Brian pointed at the paperwork. The financial planner found all of this after your fall. Every page told the same story. I'd borrowed against the house again and again until there was almost nothing left. A moment later, Melissa walked in carrying 2 coffees. She saw the papers in my hands and quietly sat down. "You know now." I nodded. "I didn't want either of you feeling guilty." Brian gave a tired smile. "Well, it worked." Nobody laughed. After a while, Melissa asked, "Do you remember coming home from the hospital?" "Of course." "For 4 months, you were never alone." I frowned. "I thought you were visiting." She slowly shook her head. "We were living there." Brian stayed half the week. Melissa stayed the other half. You wandered outside before sunrise. You left the stove on. You fell again in the laundry room. At first, I wanted to argue. Then little pieces started coming back. The burned pan. Brian replacing the back door lock. Melissa insisting I keep my phone with me. I remembered thinking they were overreacting. Now I understood. Brian looked exhausted. I turned down work. Melissa looked at the floor. I used almost all my vacation days. We hired help. We took turns. We kept telling ourselves we could make it work. She looked at me. We weren't trying to get rid of you. We were trying not to lose you. Nobody spoke for a while. Then I looked at my son, my daughter, the papers on the table, and I realized something I'd never admitted before. I'd spent my whole life believing it was my job to rescue everybody else. Never once figured they'd be the ones trying to rescue me. I closed the folder. I owe both of you an apology. Melissa started to speak. I shook my head. Let me finish. When your mother died, I didn't know who I was anymore. So every time one of you needed help, I stepped in. I thought I was protecting you. I looked at Brian. The truth is, I never gave you the chance to protect me. He nodded. No, you didn't. A few weeks later, spring finally arrived. One Sunday, the whole family came for lunch. Afterward, my granddaughter Emma and I sat outside on a bench. She was finishing an ice cream cone. After a while, she looked up at me. Grandpa, yeah? Do you like living here? I looked across the parking lot. Brian was unloading groceries. Melissa was carrying a basket of clean laundry toward the front entrance. I smiled. No, she waited. But I liked that they never stopped coming. When it was time to go inside, Brian reached for my walker. I've got it, I said. I know, he answered, but I'm walking with you. This time, I let him. For years, I thought being a good father meant carrying everybody else's load. Took losing my house to see that my kids had been trying to carry mine the whole time.